Act brand new.
We're going to act brand new. Like, this is the way it was always planned to go.
Right, right. I've never shared this with you before, Christina. But
I'm Kiki, and I'm a storyteller. Everyone has a story, and I'm here to listen. This is What It's Like to Be Here.
I met Silvia when we were both working in media here in Chicago. I was at the weekly Extra community newspaper, and she was helping lead incredible work at Vocalo, the sister station to WBEZ. At Vocalo, Silvia helped shape a new kind of urban alternative format for public radio. And she really raised the bar on community engagement, showing up for neighborhood initiatives, the arts, and people like me trying to get new ideas off the ground. She even gave me a side hustle, producing segments, and over the years, she's become a very dear friend. Today, she's the director of the local news program at the MacArthur Foundation and a core partner in Press Forward, helping strengthen local journalism, including efforts supporting Spanish language news across the U.S. I'm so happy to have you here, Silvia.
thank you for having me here, Christina.
The journey you've been on is amazing. I've always looked up to you in terms of finding your own path and like navigating business and journalism and this world that you're now in. So I'm excited to talk to you all about it. But first, how old are you?
Oh my gosh. Spiritually or like in real life?
Are you a teenager spiritually? 'Cause
Yes. I'm a baby. I was telling my husband yesterday. I was like, "Es que estoy chiquita." 'Cause he was like,
you don't understand.
he's like, "No, you're old." It's like, I am 45.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a good
So
age.
it's a good age.
It's
you know,
solid.
it's solid. I am feeling good about 45. Yes.
Excellent. And then I love to double it because I'm just like, you come so far and you're only 45. And then if you live to 90, that's a whole.
That's a whole lifetime. Yeah.
A whole lifetime.
And frankly, I almost look at every year as like a dog year. Right? Like they say like every year is like 7 years. For
Yes,
like
that's
dog
what
years.
well,
so
especially now.
actually I'm ancient right now.
It's like the older you get, it compounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I do feel like there are some years where I've learned so much, where so much has happened, where you just come out of that year a different person,
Yes.
right?
Well, I think about, and I guess it's the bad comparison to make right now, but I think about like the presidents, right? Like when you think about what.
No, keep going.
The one example I'm going to throw out there is Obama, right? Like
Right.
he comes in like fresh-eyed, bushy-tailed, right? And like black hair. And then 4 years later come out, look like, 10 years have passed, right? And then he was there for two terms, right? So just like the age and the wear and tear on individuals.
Absolutely. Yes, totally agree with that. I really were, and it's related, right? Where I thought you were going with this is that these past.
Yeah.
I keep referring it to as past 2 years.
No,
this
it's
past
10.
year.
But also like 10
Yes,
when it all
yes.
started.
When it all started, right? But this past year has felt incredibly long, and I feel like it's heavy
Yes.
on a lot of us,
Yes.
right? It has made time feel a lot longer, and so we'll see what the rest of this time looks
You're like,
like.
I'm really 60.
Yeah, right. At this point, I'm going to start charging for like all of the mental health and wellness issues that are coming up.
Oh, all right. So, well, that's a good segue into like what the concept of this podcast is. So tell me, after all of these years being on the radio, doing your thing, what does it feel like to be here right now?
Gosh, such a big question.
It is.
I don't know that I have the perfect answer for it. I guess what I will say is that it feels great in this moment, just as a professional, as a mother, as a partner to an amazing man, a husband, who helps support a lot of my professional endeavors and life endeavors. It feels great as a sister, as a mother, as a community member to be able to support and do things that, in my ideal state in mind, I hope it's to make the world a better place, right? And so I feel fortunate to be where I am right now, thanks to so many people. The journey has not been easy, but it's been filled with love and with support and with cheerleaders and with just people who believe in you, right? So I feel good. I feel good about who's on my squad.
Nice. That's a great answer. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's a blessing in disguise, right? To know that there's always somebody that's going to kind of push you along or be that support system, even when maybe they don't even know that they are.
I think that that's so true. I mean, the support squad looks different for everyone, right? And I do think that there are sometimes people that are in your court and on your side that you don't even know, what they're doing for you on the back end and how they're supporting you. And sometimes that's the quiet work that you find out about later. And, all of it is meaningful, right? And so, yeah, I feel incredibly lucky, and don't take any of the blessings that have fallen in my lap for granted, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so the one thing I was thinking about as I was preparing for the interview, I was like, Sylvia's always been in radio, right? Audio, doing something storytelling wise. Yeah. So talk to me about like how you got started in radio, and I guess your little journey.
I don't even know how to perfectly answer that because there have been so many clues to being involved in this sort of space, radio, being a part of that. I think of some of the earliest memories that I have as a kid were around asking Santa Claus for radios. Like I didn't ask for I think like traditional like kid things. Like I asked for, I want a radio, or like I want like a keyboard or some electronic gadget, right?
Yeah.
So there's a picture of me. I don't know if I feel like I've posted this like on my Facebook or like my Instagram before. I'm like literally sitting like on a boombox. Dressed up in Rainbow Bright and like wearing like some like Ray-Bans and like, some like motorcycle gear over. So symbolically, radio has been in my life.
Yeah.
From a very early age. One of my earliest memories, I must have been, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years old, sitting with my mom, like at this big consola, this big like radio that we used to have like back in the day with like the vinyl player and like the 8-track player, and they had like the globe, like I had like a little disco ball. So when you turned on the radio, like this little disco ball would turn on, and there were like lights coming out of it. But I remember sitting at this consola with my mom, and she was interviewing me, and she recorded the interview like on this 8-track player, and I feel like that's like my first interview and one of my first radio experiences. So, early on, as a kid, I used to, sit in dark rooms listening to like radio stories that used to air on TV that were like olden time radio stories, and just listen to those stories. At some point, I started a radio show with my sister. I must have been like 10 years old. It was called The Crazy Sisters. And so I still have a couple of those cassette tapes. I must have recorded this radio show from 10 to 13.
Oh, wow.
So it was a radio show, and I used to have jingles, and I used to, we used to record skits. And so storytelling, making radio, has always been in the background.
Yeah, that's so crazy. That's so cute, though.
This is why when you ask the question, it's like, well, when did I get into radio? Because I can think of like so many moments where like it's been in my life. I used to do the announcements in high school.
Oh, really?
And I was on speech team, and my speech team teacher, she had me doing the announcements. And one day, we were a very small team. We used to go to compete with all of these schools, and like everybody had like 20, 30 people on their teams, and we had a very small team. So we used to try to get in as many competitions as possible. One of those competitions was radio. So one day she's like, yeah, you're going to do the radio, you know, or the radio portion of this. So you have to write a radio script.
Oh,
and
wow.
you have to like read a radio script. I was like, how do I do that? And at the time, my only reference point was Coco Cortez on B96. I
Yeah.
think it was B96. She used to give like radio announcements, like at the top, you know, because I wasn't listening to NPR, like I was, or,
Right,
or
right.
like public radio. I was listening to B96, and so Coco Cortez was the person. Or it wasn't Coco Cortez. She was DJ, but or Karen Hand. Somebody on the music station used to do the top of the hour news reports, and so I just based my style
Off of that.
off of that.
Okay.
And so finally, in high school, my mom saw this public service announcement on Univision, and they were promoting a youth journalism class at a radio station in La Villita, and they were going to be training young people between 15 and 21 in radio broadcasting, and the kids would get to have their own radio show. So my mom, she, wrote down the information.
It's always the moms.
It's always the mom. She wrote down the information, and she's like, hey, I heard about this thing on the radio or on Univision. You should look into it. And I was like, oh, it sounds pretty cool. I applied and then just forgot all about it. I never heard back. And then I finally just one day got a call, and they asked me to come over for an interview at the Boys and Girls Club in Little Village. And they accepted me shortly after that. But then the classes didn't start right away. There were a lot of like stops.
But this was like the inception of it, right?
It was.
Okay.
It was. So I went into this class really, or this program, not thinking this was a potential career path. But I was excited about the possibility of having a radio show.
Right.
And I was actually, because it was my senior year in high school, and I was considering what college to go to, I thought if I were to stay in town, this might be a nice way to, complement a communications degree. I was thinking about going to UIC, which is actually where I started off my college career, and they had a communications program, but it wasn't a very strong communications program. So I thought this would be a nice complement to that. And so it became a journey. I did not know what pathway it would put me on. But it was one that was rooted in, I began to view not just radio, but just the power of media in the different lens, in how media, radio or other mediums were really tools to help shape community narratives, to help shape our understanding of how we live and how we operate in the world, right? If you don't have access to news stories and information that can help you understand your place in the world, then you don't know how you can fully participate in it. And that was the journey that this program that was a part of the National Museum of Mexican Art at the time, Radio Arte, that was the journey that it really put me on.
But it's so interesting about your mom pointing you in that direction, or seeing that opportunity for you, right? Because, I feel like as a mom now, right, you're noticing what your kids are doing.
Oh, yeah.
You notice what their strengths are, and I just remember my mom when I was like, I want to study English, right? Because I was thinking about writing, and she was like, "Why don't you think about journalism? Because what are you going to do? Write the next great American novel?" And I was like,
Yeah.
But then I thought, when my mom was thinking about a career,
Yeah.
right? A way to sustain myself, make money, and do what I wanted to do. And so it kind of turned me on to this concept of journalism and storytelling for exactly that, the benefit of educating people to live a better life, right? And that's just so funny to me.
Yeah, no, I think, my mom was definitely looking out for that, and she saw my different interests throughout my childhood. I did say at several points like, oh, I want to be a journalist, or I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a business person. I had like all of these, I want to be an author. Like I had all of these different, interests
Yeah.
that ultimately I feel like I've been able to play a role or do all of those things.
Right.
And I think that when she saw the opportunity of, it's journalism, it's, radio, that, she understood that this would be something that would be of interest for me. She likes reminding me of that too, as well. She's like, es que si no hubiera sido por mí.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, yes, mommy, yes, okay.
Oh my goodness, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So when did you get to Vocalo? And because I feel like there was so much growth with your tenure there, and the things that you were able to accomplish with the team, what was Vocalo when you got there?
Oh gosh. So Vocalo was the experiment at the time of Chicago Public Media. I don't even think it was Chicago Public Media back then. But the vision that they had was, how do we introduce public radio to a whole new generation, right? They were thinking about their audiences and recognizing what, still tends to be true, right? That public radio audiences that have a mission to serve the broader community, we're really failing at that in many ways, and that they were, for the most part, serving more educated, affluent white folks, right, here in Chicago, the North Shore crowd.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that there have been some improvements generally in public radio all across the spectrum. I think that there have been incredible strides to see public media truly live its mission. But at the time, they had this vision of, well, let's start this second service that was at the time, it was like a YouTube for radio model. And so what they were imagining was they were going to create sort of like the competition to Facebook and to like all of these social media spaces. And it was going to be a user-generated content model like YouTube. Right?
Okay.
So you can upload your own content. You could upload this podcast. You could upload, whatever sort of sound bits. And the promise was that they would play it on the radio. Okay.
Oh.
So think about all the stuff that lives on YouTube
That you would never want to play on the
that you,
radio? Or would never want anybody to see?
that you would never want anybody to see. Like there was no, curatorial agenda. And when you tuned in, that's what it sounded like. Like it just was like
Stuff.
that was
Okay.
playing on the air. And unfortunately, the way that they had positioned this in communities and with funders was that this was going to be the next generation thing that was also going to be a tool in reaching underserved communities in Chicago.
Okay.
And so I think that, for me, by the time that I got there, a lot of the credibility for this project had gone out the door. And so I was just trying to leverage, my experience at Radio Arte and really cash in on the credibility that I'd built, in community with funders about reimagining and repositioning Vocalo in a way that was just representative and aligned with the brand promise, right? And so what I knew to be true was that you could create these experiences where people could participate in public radio and public media, but you had to give them a reason to participate, and you had to be just very you had to provide really clear frameworks with how people should participate, because otherwise you would get the equivalent of would be like cat videos for radio, right? And so what I understood was that music and culture was such a powerful gateway to bring people in, and that if you could shape a music experience that was also rooted in the things that we knew to traditionally work in urban radio, with the morning show, with the personality driven sort of format that people trust, who they trust because they hear them on a radio every day and there's
Right.
personalities, that if we lean into that format, you could begin to introduce all of the other elements, right? And so I was of the opinion that we needed to just develop a music format that was representative of the local music scene, in Chicago, that leaned into, what we need to be, Chicago music, to bring in the DJs, to bring in, all of the elements that, so many of us recognize as being important features of Chicago radio, but then also creating avenues for participation. Right. And so, we created the Vocalo Storytellers, program. We created partnerships with existing, community news outlets and independent producers that were joining us on the air and, presenting, their content as well, and were in conversation with us. And then in that space, then, bringing in WBEZ reporters, right, who were doing the news reporting, and were then able to come onto this format, into a format that had already developed trust in the community to talk about issues that were pertinent to our audiences. So, I feel like I'm incredibly proud of what we built, what we developed. I truly feel like it was a blueprint for other music formats. It's unfortunate, we didn't have a signal that reached Chicago proper, but I think that there was that we learned a lot. I'm also excited that Vocalo continues. It's gone through its up and downs, but it's moving forward with its format, and trying to figure out ways of making sure that in this new iteration of Chicago public media writ large, that they're an important part of the story and not a side, addendum. This is like the diversity project that we do, but rather something that truly informs, all of the work that Chicago public media does as part of the Chicago story.
Yeah. And I think the way that I saw it and people that I talked to saw it was urban radio.
Yeah.
It wasn't the stuffy, just news reporting, but like you said, you integrated things that made up the community that we knew.
Yeah.
So it was like we were seeing ourselves mirrored.
Yeah.
In mirrored for audio. Yeah, I guess.
Mirrored. Yeah, I'll take it. It's allowable for sure.
But like what I was listening to sounded like people like me.
Yeah.
Right. And they were in the communities where I also would venture out. Right. And I feel like we've lost that in especially the commercial radio stations, because you want to hear something local.
Yeah.
And you hear, oh, we were looking up on Reddit and this is what, these couples are fighting over today, and it's like, okay, great. But there are things happening in Chicago and all I get is a traffic update.
Yeah.
There's no substance without listening to a BEZ, right? But how do you mix it all together? Why can't I get all of it in one? And I think Vocalo was that for a lot of us.
That was the vision. And, I always said, like, if you think about when you're hanging out, with your friends and with your people, right, and you're at, a coffee shop or a bar, think about the diversity of the conversations that you have, right?
Yeah.
Like you talk about the news, you talk about, the stuff that's funny, the show that you just watched, the problems that you're having in your relationships. All of that's valid, right?
Yeah.
And being able to create a space where there was that type of range of we could have the serious conversations, and we can talk about the hard issues, but we need to create that broader representations of who we are as a people and as a community.
Yeah.
That's how you create that trust and feel represented. And I agree with you. I think there's such a lost opportunity with commercial radio, both in English and in Spanish, to really take advantage of just creating a better sense of purpose,
Yeah.
right, for how we all live in our city.
For sure. And I just remember those times of going to the office and going to Navy Pier and walking in, and after a while, like, it's a community. Like, you know everybody and you see everyone. And I was like, "Hey, Christina," because I was there for. It started off with Extra,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
partnership where I
Yeah.
was able to go on and talk about health topics that I was covering in the
Yep.
in the paper. And then after that, with like just bringing in people that I knew that were doing cool things, you know, in the city or whatnot. Music, the bands, right? I ended up bringing in like this band that I was managing at one point. We played them on the radio, and they were thrilled.
Yeah.
Somebody from California, one of the LA bands, Las Cafeteras.
Yeah, that's right. I
Oh my
remember having
goodness.
them, yeah.
Something that brought so much joy, right? To be able to do that and have people say like, "Oh my God, my song played on the radio. That was amazing," you
Yeah.
know? And then even like podcasters, right? Like, I mean, it's full circle. Actually, what's really funny is that a friend of mine from college that I had not talked to in ages ended up emailing me. He was like, "I was listening to Vocalo and I heard Gabe, your friend Gabe, on it, and he was talking about intellectual nonsense. And then I started listening to intellectual nonsense, and you were hosting that." He's like, "That is so wild." I'm like,
That's so
like,
cool.
yeah. So
I love hearing, I can't tell you how often I've kind of actually recently where I've bumped into people, again, that I don't know, and somehow Vocalo has come up in the conversation, and they're like, "Oh my God," like they just like, you know, the emotion is just so like visible about just like them describing how much Vocalo has meant to them and like what they loved about it. I was at like a sip and paint last week with my team, and we found out towards the end that the owner of this sip and paint was also in a music band and had been on Vocalo and was just like, "Oh my gosh, like, you know, that's so great. Like, you know, thank you for creating that space." And so it's so wonderful to hear. And also just to highlight that, you know, so much of what's important, you know, in this story is also echoed in the stories of really community radio, you know, across the country. The role that community radio, you know, plays in communities, especially in tribal communities and rural communities and places all across the country, is a powerful one, right? Because community radio just gives people a place to keep their culture because they're sharing the music and the experiences that are representative of their community. Oftentimes at these radio stations, they're the only radio stations that sort of preserve the language of their tribes, for example. Like that's the only place you're gonna hear it. The only place where you're gonna hear the very, you know, specific regional, you know, music. So I say that to say that, you know, the Vocalo experience is just, it's illustrative of just the power of radio across the country and being able to bring people together. And so I know that, you know, there's so many formats out there, you know, podcast and Instagram and, you know, the socials, and I know I'm sounding like a boomer describing all of this. But that, you know, radio, I think, is still such a powerful tool in many communities. And so I'm just grateful to have had a voice and an opportunity to shape what that looks like here in Chicago.
yeah, and on that note, just speaking of these smaller, right, whether they're newspapers or radio stations, and even public radio across the country, right, you see the funding going down, or you see these newspapers closing.
Yeah.
What kind of impact does that make on a community that doesn't have that hyper local news source?
Yeah. It's hard out there. It's really hard out there. So I manage a program at the MacArthur Foundation that is really looking to be a tiny, player in this really huge problem that we have, where we're losing newspapers every day across the country. Local news is literally dying across the country. We have what's called news deserts. That's where there are zero newspapers in counties that are available to tell the community story.
Is
right?
is it in a certain geographical locations, or is it all over?
It's all over. I mean, we have news deserts in Illinois. I mean, I think that we should feel lucky in Chicago that there is a diversity of news sources. But I would argue that there are still communities that are not represented in this geography in this region. Actually, I have this bookmarked in a book that I hope to read over spring break. Somebody just sent it to me with a post-it next to a page that describes an article that Laura Washington wrote in, I want to say, I don't know if it was in the 2000s, it was sometime in the 2000s. She wrote an article for In These Times where she talked about the concept of news deserts back then. So she was, I'm going to give her credit for coining this term and saying that, even in places that have the diversity of news outlets, there are still communities that are not represented. Since this time, and again, this is new information for me, but since this time, just this term news deserts has application throughout the country, but it's especially true in Appalachian communities that have, the highest concentration of news deserts in the U.S. South, across the U.S.-Mexico border. But this is true across the country.
Wow.
And so when you do an overlay of news deserts with other types of deserts, food deserts, philanthropic deserts, like there's just a correlation, in all of that. So this makes communities really vulnerable. And so the effects of losing a local news outlet in your community, they're maybe not seen right away, but they become consequential, right? Because you lose the ability to understand what's happening in your community. You lose the ability to hold your elected officials accountable, right? Because now your elected officials are like, oh, we can get away with, moving this money around or doing this thing, right? You lose the ability to, really the political polarization that we're experiencing in this country is in large part driven by the fact that there isn't this local anchor, right, that's helping us understand how these national decisions are impacting us on a local level.
Right.
So what happens when you have a vacuum, when suddenly there isn't anybody there that's a trusted, source? What happens is that we allow these national outlets, like the Fox Newses of the world, and all of these other outlets that are sort of filling this space. We allow them to shape the local narrative,
Right.
And then we allow social media to also take that space, right? And we now, even with the creation or with what we're seeing with AI, like all we're seeing are bad actors influencing how we're feeling on a local level.
Right.
And so it's not great.
No, because that's what leads to stress and people panicking and having these, I don't know, it's just not a good place to be mentally.
It's not. You want to be able to understand the good that's happening in your community as well. You want to be able to know about, little Luna who just kicked the winning, score, the winning goal, like in the community. You want to be able to learn about the great artists that we have living down the street, the local shop that just, opened up. We want to be able to hear these stories about community,
Right.
to help that fabric, right? If you don't know your neighbors,
Exactly.
if you don't know what's happening and who's doing what, then that's where you start, creating these fear, the environment for fear, right?
Yeah, because it's easy
Right.
to say oh, you don't know them. Well,
Right.
they're going to come after
Right.
you.
Well, that's what this current, political environment is all about, right? Is taking advantage of those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities. And so that's the work that I'm in right now of, trying to support those types of newsrooms that are community centered, that are really thinking about the needs of community members, and how to best reach the community. It's not the same in every community. And so how do you best meet those news and information needs for communities? In some communities, it's via WhatsApp, and some it's radio, and some it's newsletters. So really looking at, how the landscape for just the business model, right, for local news has changed tremendously. How do we create the conditions where these outlets can thrive for the long run?
Yeah. So you're seeing different type of media. So it's not just like one,
Right.
like it's not all radio, right? So
No. Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, radio colors my perspective and my experience, but, I feel like if you're even, let's look at the term public media, right? Public media, you traditionally think of public TV, public radio, all for good reason. Because I think when they're really the original nonprofit news models, right? And so when you're a nonprofit, you're usually governed by a mission statement of serving the public in some way. And what we're seeing is that there are outlets across the country that are fulfilling public interest missions that don't have a terrestrial signal. But in my mind, that's public media because they're living and functioning and organizing themselves to serve the community. And so, we are seeing, one of my favorite projects that I adore the person that leads it, but that I always cite as a great example is an initiative in Arizona called Conecta Arizona. Maritza Felix, who's the journalist that runs that, was seeing how during the peak of COVID, people were not receiving the information they needed. During the pandemic. They were receiving a lot of mis and disinformation, particularly via WhatsApp. People were being, they were sharing that, you shouldn't, take the shot, you shouldn't all sorts of mis and disinformation. And a lot of it was coming from her family. Right.
Oh.
And so they were they kept, they were using the WhatsApp groups, and she was on constant combating mis and disinformation mode. And she's like, well, if this is happening in my family, this is happening in the broader community. So she opened up a WhatsApp channel called El Cafecito, and people started joining the WhatsApp. And this Cafecito was just really a space for people to ask questions. And her job was to really respond to these questions in a very non-judgmental way. You think this because of this, but let's bring in some health experts and let's do some reporting to help, inform, some of these questions that you may have. So she started actually using that as this engagement vehicle, but this vehicle to then move into other platforms, creating in-person events, partnering up with the radio station. She launched a newsletter. And so now she has an official newsroom.
Oh,
but,
wow.
But it all started from this WhatsApp group. And, it's just one of those examples of launching something that was at its core from understanding a community information need.
Right. Yeah.
During the pandemic. And there's a lot of the local news projects that I support across the country that same thing. They started because nobody else was giving them this information.
Yeah.
And so they became the people that were well, I have to do this because nobody else is doing this for us. And our people are literally dying.
Yeah.
People are dying. And nobody seems to give, shit.
Right.
So they did something about it. And so, but it's hard work because so many people go into this. They're journalists or they're, community organizers. They didn't come into this with a business background or an understanding of sustainability and how to ask for grants and how to ask for support. And so, so much of what I'm thinking about is how do you support these really wonderful leaders and surround them with the technical assistance, the runway to help understand how they can do this, or surround themselves with people that know how to do it.
Right.
Right. Because I think that, we want to see these projects be the example of the types of media that we should have across the country. Mm-hmm. All while we're fighting, these monsters of media, which right now, every day our big media just consolidates more and more and just have more power over, the stories that we hear, on cable, on our local TV stations, and soon on our movies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And on the shows that we watch.
I mean, when you learn about like social media and just how much money, like just millions and millions of dollars being spent on disinformation or people just rabble rousing, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to cause problems. I'm like, and then you have these communities that have nothing. And
Yeah.
you're like, you're just putting all this money into horrible things
Yeah.
to separate us.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's a matter of life and death in a lot of cases. And it's just amazing how like where the money is going.
Yeah.
Right. And what that could do.
Yeah.
If it was being put in a good place. Right.
Yeah.
The things we have to
I'm
overcome.
sorry. I feel like I just
No,
created
okay.
the what are we going to do about this?
Everybody's going to be a reporter.
Right,
okay?
right.
That's what we're going to do.
Everybody just, honestly, like everybody just has to like own the story. We have to like, be our own fact checkers. And also, again, I'm seeing this especially so in our communities and in Latino families of YouTube, again, and WhatsApp are powerful tools. YouTube in particular with these powerful algorithms that it's really easy, especially for parents, to fall into these YouTube traps, right?
Yeah.
Into these YouTube cycles where they're getting a lot of, like, it's no longer just Herbalife, like, like they're getting like all of the like, information from there in many cases. I feel like I spend a lot of time fact checking.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm much like, where did you hear that?
Right. Where did you hear that?
Mm-hmm. And can I get another source to corroborate that?
Right.
Verify.
Yes. And so I think that, we should be mindful of this happening, and, making sure that we don't just like let it go of like, that's that, crazy thing that like mom and dad are thinking, but like, let's try to like, pump the brakes
Yeah.
on this shaping our communities.
All right. Let's go a little lighter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing that I know about you is you lived all over the city of Chicago and then some.
Yeah.
Outskirts.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Chicago and how it's shaped who you are and who you've become.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like I'm just a kid from Chicago.
As we all do.
Yeah. That has lived in other places in the burbs, and I was born Norwegian American in Humboldt Park, and had the fortune, I guess, of living in many places throughout the city, right up to 12, 13 years old. I lived in 3 different places in Westtown. I lived in Little Village. I lived in Logan Square. I lived in, what's that? I guess what's the place by where La Jimenez is on North Avenue? They had really good tortas there. Anyways, I've lived everywhere, like seriously. And so I feel like I have this version of the city that I remember from the 80s and early 90s that I just like kind of hold on to and I remember. And I also remember it as a contrast to how the city looks like now, like the West Town that I lived in back then.
Oh yeah.
It's not the West Town of today. I love the experience, and in retrospect, right, because we did move around a lot, and I did go through a lot of classroom changes, that I got to experience the diversity of the city. Like I went to school with all sorts of different kids from all sides of the city. And I think about that now, and I just think about what a formative, journey that was for me. When I was in 7th grade, we moved out to the suburbs. And so then I got a switch up there, and which I had to adjust to. That was also formative in understanding how we think about the city kids versus the suburb kids, but then also the dynamics, I feel like, of segregation that were happening in the schools that I went to in the suburbs as well. I ended up going to Proviso West, and we had it was a very diverse school. I think it was probably, diverse in that it was probably 40% Black, 40% Latino, Mexican, and then everybody else was from white, or that couldn't afford like the private schools, and and everything else was miscellaneous.
Yeah.
But depending on where you were, like into school, if you were Black or if you were Latino, like you kind of were like, okay, they're from Bellwood and Maywood, and they're from Stone Park and Melrose Park, or like or Hillside. So there was this like understanding of like, okay, if they're from here, like they're from there, and so that was I think it's a curious sociological experience for me as well in high school. But I'm grateful for all of it, because it allowed me the opportunity to understand how to move in different spaces, and I wouldn't do anything differently.
Yeah, the adaptability. Right?
Yeah, you
Being
had to
able
adapt.
Just
You
flow.
had to adapt. I had friends of all walks of life, and as a kid and as a teenager, you're sort of like, all right, so like, how do I fit into these spaces? And I think that testing, all of those, identities and how to, be in different spaces really, have shaped who I am, today, and my comfort level, right? And just navigating conversations and understanding how to approach all sorts of situations. But yeah, I also talk about the one regrettable year that I lived in Texas. And I moved back as fast as I could. And so,
But like, there are some not good parts of Texas, nice parts. But where were you?
I did not land in a good part of Texas. I'll be honest with you. I feel like if I would have landed in a good part of Texas, I would have probably stayed there.
Yeah.
The only reason I landed there is because my parents ended up moving there. And so they ended up in a town in the Dallas suburbs called Mesquite, Texas. And if you ever watch the show King of the Hill, I think that the folks from that town are based in Garland, and Mesquite is basically like the sister to Garland. So that was a culture shock for me, actually.
Yeah.
So Chicago did not prepare me for this culture shock.
Wait, but Chicago, then weren't you also in the smallest suburb?
Well, when we moved out to the suburbs, so, I mentioned like all the places that people traditionally were from if you were Mexican. I lived in Berkeley.
And I think I know the other Mexican
The
family
other Mexican-
that lives there because my uncle.
Let me tell you, and again, I'm referencing life back in the 90s. I am sure it is different now. I am telling you how I remember it.
Right.
This is how I remember it. I remember being like the first. At the time, I thought we were the first. There was another Mexican family that we didn't know about that was like hidden, like in the corner that we never saw. But we were, in my mind, the first Mexican family on that block. And we were received like the first Mexican family on that block.
Oh my God. But Berkeley, it's so funny because like I said, my uncle lived there. My cousins grew up there. They're like, it's a square mile. I'm like, this is the tiniest suburb ever. Yeah. So then you go from there and then to Dallas where it's King of the Hill land, which...
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes. I mean, look, like, yes. So there was the like learning how to live on a block where you were the only Mexican family and like your neighbors across the street and on the sides of you probably were not a fan of you living there, and they didn't make it a secret that they were not
Yeah.
fans of us living there. I think eventually they came around, but when we first moved in, it was clear that they were not fans.
Oh my goodness.
That being said, you know, the schools that we went to were a bubble for me because we had kids from all over.
Everywhere, yeah.
But, you know, by the time that I moved to Dallas, like I was I was in the city all the time. I was going to UIC. I was at Radio Arte. Like I was back in my mix, right? And I had all of these things going for me. And so when my parents made a decision to move, I was adamant at first that I was not going to. And eventually, you know, dutiful eldest daughter, I was like, yeah, I'll go. And so they went first. I followed them afterwards. And they, yeah, we were in this town. I ended up having to work at a trucking company because the challenge for me was that, well, I can't go to school because I need to establish an in-state residency in order to pay for in-state tuition.
Okay.
So I guess I'm taking the year off so that I can work and do that. And so I don't know, like I think I posted like my resume like on monster.com or something. And
I forgot all about that site. Jeez,
yes, I
Louise.
know.
Career builder.
Yes,
Oh, that's another
like
one.
yeah, but I think this was like monster.com.
Monster.
I think I posted my resume there, or like I filled something out. Somebody called me and they're like, "Hey, like we're hiring," and it was a trucking company. So I was working in the dispatch office, and it was a trip. Yeah, I was working with some, you know, real like Texan folks.
I feel like working at a trucking like company, that's a Texan thing. I feel like
I guess, yeah. Well,
don't
no,
know.
I know some folks that work at trucking companies here, but I think the unique aspect of working in a dispatch office here, like you know, I worked with all the people that had like the two first names, like you know.
Okay.
And here I was, this kid in our cubicle with like all of these like, you know, progressive, you know, signs that like in our cubicle that I'm sure nowadays, like back then, I think there was an environment where like, you know, people would talk shit to you, but like wouldn't like, you know, try to burn your house down or anything. At least, you know, I could get away with it during that time. But then, you know, 9/11 did happen.
Right.
While I was there. I was in the
okay.
dispatch office. I remember that early morning, and I heard Randy walking around, you know, the corner, and was like, "Well, the Arabs have bombed us." And I was
my
like,
goodness.
"Dude, like what? Like what did you say?" And you know, we all went, you know, on a shared, you know, TV, and we're watching everything that's happening, and like, you know, like the world changed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I need to get out of here. And I didn't last a year. Like I was gone like after 10 or 11 months. I came back to Chicago. But yeah, it was an adjustment. I didn't know how to be in that space. And they didn't know, like, first of all, they were like, they were shocked that they were Mexicans in Chicago and that I was from Chicago. And I was like, dude, like, what are you talking about? Like Chicago is like the most populated Mexican city outside of LA. Like what?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you
yeah.
talking
And
about?
people don't know that.
Yeah, and people don't know that.
Well, they didn't.
Yeah, well, they didn't at the
yeah.
time, right? Things have changed, but yeah, it was a character building experience. What I will say, and again, things have changed a lot since that period. That my takeaway from that time there was that I appreciated how out in the open the racism was. Like I was actually appreciative because I was like, oh, great, like you're like openly racist.
At least
like,
I know.
Like I know, and like I see, you know, a Confederate, like I know how to navigate that.
Right.
And so when I moved back to Chicago, I began to understand how the racism moved differently.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Like I began to understand like, oh, this shit that I'm experiencing is just like structural like racism, like polite like racism.
Like that. What's passive?
Passive, like it
Yeah.
was passive aggressive racism.
Yes. Yes. Where like it's an underhanded comment.
Right.
You know, you're like, wait a second.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I began to understand that difference in that context. Again, different lifetime ago. I feel like now it's all out in the open because the genie's out of the bottle. But I began to understand that nuance as well. But Chicago shaped me. It's really my reference point for everything.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, so
Okay.
if there's anything that you could go back and tell Sylvia when I first met you to give you some reference points, is there anything that you would go back and just tell yourself about the next few years in your journey?
Let's see. We met in 2011.
Your guess is as good as mine because I don't know.
We met in the early 2010s. I think. I would tell myself, shit's about to get hard.
Brace for impact.
Brace for impact. Shit's about to get hard. I would tell myself, trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. Lean into your instincts. Don't second guess yourself. I think that I fumbled a lot second guessing myself in a lot of ways. So that's what I would tell myself. I probably give myself a big hug in that brace for impact way of lean in on your people because you always have to be strong. And I think I did spend a lot of the decade trying to be strong in ways that I didn't need to be.
Do you find that you are like now trusting yourself more
Yes,
moving forward?
I do feel like I trust myself more. Like I lean into my instincts. It's been a hard knocks decade of learning, and there's a lot that I can take with me to into the future version of Sylvia that I think will make whatever comes next easier, and largely because I'm able to follow my instincts more easily, and again be more vulnerable, right, when I need help.
Excellent. And I hope that all the listeners enjoy the little music in the background because you know what? It's getting nicer. And I'm like, maybe I would record these outside at some point.
It's good. It's a good vibe. I love hearing the music in the background. Once you have the music blaring, it's all good.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
It's a sign of summer.
I know, warmer weather.
Warmer weather.
And so you can hear, you know where I live if you can hear the music.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But Sylvia, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
It was a great conversation. And I'm sure I'll be putting things in the show notes for anybody listening that wants to learn a little bit more about, I don't know, anything we've talked about today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to everyone else, catch you on the flip side. Bye. Hey, this is Kiki. If you made it this far, you officially made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for being here. If you're listening on a platform where you can rate and subscribe, please do. It really helps more people find the show. And hey, leave a comment. Tell me what you liked, what stuck with you, and what you want more of. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at What It's Like to Be Here Pod. Catch you on the flip side.